This podcast is sponsored by Tusk, an open source non-ICO crypto project powered by community. Check them out on the web at tusk.network. That's TUSC.network. The Rob McNeely program is the nexus of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, welcome to the program. Hey guys, today I am talking to Owen York once again. He is with Gun Industry Marketplace, and we're going to just kind of talk about what's going on in the gun industry. It's getting toward the end of the year, and they do kind of a end of year recap about what's going on in the industry. So, Owen, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
Hey, good. How are you doing, Rob?
Good. So, what have you been up to?
Lots of work. Busy over here.
It's been a little crazy here too. So you've been on the show before, and so you're kind of like a return guest. But for the people who are kind of new to the podcast, because we've been growing, kind of give a little bit of background. Tell us, like, what do you do, and
Sure.
How did you get involved with the gun industry?
Yeah, well, if I were to do a quick recap, I would say I had an earlier professional career where I sort of grew up with high tech, and then I sort of evolved into public safety and defense and those sort of markets. And so I have a lot of high tech background in terms of sales, marketing, business development, especially, right? And then about 5.5 years ago, I entered into firearms. And so now I've been in that business for 5.5 years through several, kind of endeavors that involved into what we have, which is called the Gun Industry Marketplace. And the short and sweet about what the Gun Industry Marketplace is it's sort of a growing and evolving hub for the firearms industry. And so we're connected to all sorts of different companies of all shapes and sizes, huge in the US, as you can imagine, but also our international market has grown a lot. In fact, over the summer, it grew 3 to 7%, somewhere in there, just over the summer, which is interesting. And so what we do is we help these companies promote their names, their brands, their products, their services. And originally it started as sort of kind of like a B2B endeavor, but it's since expanded to, the average shooter, the consumer. So that's kind of cool. And I think they like it because they sort of get to see things that they don't normally get to see all the time because, not everyone has the marketing budgets of, Ruger or Smith and Wesson. So they like that. It's different stuff. It's cool stuff. But also law enforcement has really kind of taken to this for. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. It's sort of evolved into this like one-stop location for the industry. And it's growing into new categories every month. So it's cool. It's cool. But I'd say at the end of the day, it's kind of like it's a real kind of like marketing, advertising, and sort of make connections platform for the industry where it's like all in one place. So that's kind of a recap of what we do.
Very cool. And for a lot of people that may, not be in the United States or what have you, is that not because of legalities or from a regulatory standpoint, but just from politics, it's actually kind of challenging for lawful gun retailers to market, even though the firearms industry is actually constitutionally protected in the United States. And it's a huge, very well-regulated industry. Yeah, protected. But one of the things about the gun industry is that they're treated like a leper when it comes to marketing on, like social platforms and Google and things like that. And it's very difficult for lawful gun retailers and supporting accessory manufacturers and things to actually get their products into the market because of that. And so I think that's where what you're doing, Owen, with, Gun Industry Marketplace is actually a real big service, is because you have to kind of go outside those channels when you're in this space.
Yeah, you have to. Basically, I kind of prepared some notes, and one of the things we do every year is we do a survey. We call it State of the Industry, State of the Firearms Industry. And this survey, this market research, is everybody. All right, now not everybody obviously does it, but the snapshot of the industry, these could be manufacturers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 manufacturers, service providers, your local FFLs, gunsmiths, gun ranges, anybody who's instructors, anybody who actually is in the industry, we send this out to, and so we get a very nice snapshot of what's occurred, and also as kind of a preface to it, it's also confidential, so somebody can tell us who they are if they like, but we want real answers. We want to get the meat of what really occurred. So we get some very interesting answers to this, and just kind of following what you said. Yeah, that's a big deal this year, what you were just referring to. So it's kind of a nice segue into some of these results.
So tell me, what are some of the highlights? What did happen this year?
Well, I mean, it's probably no surprise to anybody who's working in the industry, but they refer to it as the Trump slump. So that's definitely still occurring. I'd say, there's some gems out there who are doing good. There's a couple of companies who I know who are doing really well and have even expanded. But I would say for the most part, 2019 was terrible, especially the summer.
Trump slump. Explain that. What is the Trump slump?
Well, let's put it this way. You had Obama, who was in office, and he was the best gun salesman probably in history. Every time that guy would open his mouth, people would go and buy more guns and ammo, you name it. I mean, it was a feeding frenzy. And I think the only person who probably could have given Obama a run for his money would have been Hillary Clinton. And the threat of Hillary as president, I mean, it was a feeding frenzy. And so you had manufacturers who were just pumping the stuff out as fast as they could make it. And retailers, I mean, it was just buying, selling, you name it, was just going on like crazy. But then when Trump won, here you have somebody who's, more or less friendly to the industry in the Second Amendment. And overnight, everything changed. It's just simple supply and demand. There was a huge surplus of inventory with the manufacturers and the distributors and the retailers, and the demand just went out the bottom overnight. And so now what you have occurring is a market correction. You had new retailers, new online stores. Everybody wants to get into the gun industry, and they're selling. And so the whole industry just kind of went like this, but then the demand dropped. And so now it's like contracting. So it was bloated. It was a balloon, sort of like the real estate market in 08. And so that's what's occurring is a huge market correction. And so that's really, there's some other things occurring, which I'll get into a little bit, but that's what the Trump slump is the demand has dropped out the bottom, and you have the entire industry really sort of returning back to business as usual as a sporting industry or supporting certain markets like law enforcement and things like that. So that's the Trump slump. But the first real point is like 2019 sucked. There's no way around it. I mean, again, there's a few gems out there, but there's dealers who've been going out of business, and I don't want to make this too general. There are some of the guys who've been around for 20 or 30 years. They're still around. They're still kicking. There's not everybody shutting their doors, but there's enough that's worthy of note of how many companies went out of business. And even with the distributors, this has been going on for the last 2 years now. They're shutting their doors. There's big ones, there's medium ones. I know one or two that have went bankrupt. I know some that are, consolidating. So it's pretty fascinating, man. There's a huge flux going on in the business right now. So that's kind of like the first real highlight,
And I'd like to point out, just, throw my 2 cents in there, is that what's happening is not that there's a loss of interest in guns or firearms. What happened is that during the Obama administration, because of the fear that, his anti-gun rhetoric instilled in people, the industry basically expanded its capacity massively to meet that demand. And
Right.
once Trump got into office, the demand basically went back down to pre-Obama levels.
Right.
And now that's correcting, because you had a big expansion, and now it's just that, people have stocked up, and I tell people that people are more like conservatives are more confident and comfortable with their gun rights when a Republican is in office versus when a Democrat is.
True.
Now, I don't necessarily think that's smart because Republicans give us lots of gun control too, but
Right.
but that's the general perception I see out there among
Well,
conservatives and
sure.
gun
Yeah,
owners.
it swings back and forth. I mean, it's a big cycle with the conservatives, the liberals, and you know, I don't know. I sort of don't buy into the two-party system myself. I'm not one of those guys. I feel like it's all the same master, so I don't buy into that. But I do buy into um, the swings. Like I feel like it's definitely a controlled thing. Like, all right, let's go make these guys happy. All right, let's make these guys happy. But underneath, there's still that underlying agenda. Um, I think it's a little different now. Last couple of years, there's some interesting things going on, which is a whole different conversation. But just in regards to firearms, it's in fact, I'll bring up this next point because it's kind of a good segue. One of the biggest problems this year, aside from we need more sales, like we need more sales, we need more customers, blah blah blah. I mean, that's a given based on what we were already saying. But what I was noting a lot, and this I saw this last year too, but even more this year, and it's not going to come as a huge surprise, but this whole media circus, these anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment campaigns, there's more taxes, there's more regulations, there's more government, there's more new legislation, these politicians, the kickback is big this year, and the demand for change is bigger this year, which isn't a huge surprise if you're paying attention to what's going on. But like, for example, there's just this one little tidbit. I know in the state of Illinois there was a new tax on dealers, right? And I don't have all the specifics, but there's some new tax on dealers where now they have to pay another $1,500 a year, which for some of these small dealers, it's another $1,500, so it's more suppression. But that's probably the number one thing that I see out there right now that's being reported to me from all facets of the industry is just they're getting very tired. The demand for change is huge, and to the point where people are starting to look for legal support, which I also find interesting. They're looking for legal support, like straight up attorneys. And here's where I think there's your NRAs and your Gun Owners of America going like, take note, guys. I'm sure they've got their work cut out for them, but I think we're going to start to see even more new Second Amendment groups cropping up to meet the demand.
So what do you mean by they're seeking more legal support? Who's seeking more legal support?
Well, like, for example, every time there's a win in the government for, a Second Amendment win, like, another constitutional carry state, or we've made inroads towards that, the sort of, I guess you could say the liberal agenda or the anti-gun agenda or whatever you want to term it. I feel like it's almost a free-for-all. They're like submitting bills left and right, federal, state, local, and I almost feel like they're just slinging these things and just kind of taking whatever sticks. Like some of them aren't passing, and then there might be this little thing that passes over here, and so it's hard to keep up with, like in terms of sheer volume. And so that's kind of what I'm gleaning out of here is, like, I know there was companies who were moving to Nevada from California. They were just jumping ship. And now I've started to see reports of people going like, I'm out of Nevada. It's too close to California. We're going to Idaho, which is, so there's definitely, there's more of an exodus going to be occurring from these states. But, there needs to be more legal support, more lobbying support. And if the big dogs on the block can't handle it, like the NRA and the Gun Owners of America, and there's some other ones out there too, that's why I think there's a demand occurring right now, more so than ever. And you're going to start to see some more action there just to handle the sheer volume, you know?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing with our Tusk project and talking to retailers, there's a lot of fear and kind of trepidation out there on what will happen, especially by companies that are in states that are not gun friendly or appeared like they're going to become ungun friendly.
Right.
And there's all sorts of pressures going on, with retailers. There's the political pressure, there's protests, there's all these crazy additional hoops and regulations and taxes. But on top of that, you're getting the corporate pressure coming onto these.
Right.
Companies are refusing to do business with lawful regulated gun retailers, and you're now getting,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
well, it's funny, like the next points on here. I'm going to give you a few more bullet points because if you see the sort of perfect storm that's being created here, we kind of touched on this before a little bit, but like for example, so we have the government side of it. That was, people were complaining about it last year, but this year it's way more. It's it's having an effect. Plus, we're coupled with the Trump slump. Plus, summers are usually slow in the industry anyway. So you have a slow summer on top of a slow industry, on top of the legal stuff. Plus, we still have increased, how do you want to call it? Censorship, we'll call it, really. Or discrimination is another one. So you have increased censorship and discrimination from companies like Amazon, eBay, PayPal, the social media giants. Like I'm telling you, Rob, I won't be surprised if one day you see Facebook/Instagram go, okay, if you have done anything, bye. I won't be surprised in the least bit. So you have that occurring, and there's demand. These companies, they want it. They want to connect to the consumer, the public, but they can't because of the increased suppression. Debanking, and this is what I think you'll find particularly interesting on the finance sort of money side of it. There's still a strangulation of the industry occurring there. Now, this was happening over the last couple of years, especially, and I've seen and heard less reports of it this year, but it is still occurring. In fact, I just heard of one yesterday. But this is what I have seen as needed as of this year is companies to even stay in business need money. Obviously, they need financing. They're looking for partnerships. And this is where you're going to be seeing a further, what's the word? Like, there's a lot of the
consolidation.
industry, and that's the word. Thank you. Consolidation already occurring. You've seen a lot last year or two. There's more coming, and it's being asked for to stay kind of afloat. So financing, partnerships are needed and wanted, but even down into investors, but right down to the local place, down to point of sale and merchant processing. These guys are having trouble finding good, reputable companies with good rates that are Second Amendment friendly, that won't drop them, which is what I think is kind of interesting about what you're doing with Tusk in the future. Like there's a solution in there somewhere, So, I mean, you could see the sort of perfect storm that's been created,
Well, on one part, I'd love nothing more to be successful with our project, right? We all want to be successful, but, I don't find joy that the industry's suffering.
Right.
We came into this project because we love the industry and we're big believers in the industry, and we see that the industry's struggling, and we see, potential solution to that. And in fact, decentralized finance and things, and some of these other things that are coming out of blockchain, not just what we're doing with Tusk, but, there's other things coming in the future that I think might actually save some of those other things and be other solutions for the industry itself. Now, you were talking about finance, like for instance, that could cover things like if someone wants to build a gun range or build a big gun store that, caters to a certain market.
Totally.
They have a hard time finding people to finance those projects, like
Totally.
through
Well, I'd say
traditional
that's
banking.
twofold. So there's going to be your businesses like you're talking about, your business financing, but also the financing for consumers, that they can finance a consumer's purchase. So I'll just throw that in there. Both of those are what I'm talking about, just to make sure it's clear.
Yes, indeed. And I think that's some of the pressure now that's becoming from the political side, the anti-gun world is now becoming ever more vocal about Visa and MasterCard, people just using debit cards
Right.
to buy purchases with their own money. And
Right.
I believe that's going to be stepped up. And I think it's going to I only think that's going to increase. And it'll be very fascinating when the networks like Visa and MasterCard themselves decide that they're not going to allow these kind of transactions to occur. And I do think that's
Very real
coming.
thing. It will not shock me in the least bit. You know, I mean, hell, it's, in one of these, I was just reading it this morning, one of the survey results. Like I said, the tabulations aren't fully done, but I've got enough. But one of them, I mean, PayPal over and over was in here. And then one of them was like, we should sue PayPal. And they're just, you know, they just won't accept it. And you're like, well, I mean, I guess that's a different conversation because it is a private company. I guess they can do whatever they want. But if this were any other industry or anything else, like the discrimination cries would be huge, you know?
Well, there are about 7 industries that are in that same boat, right?
Right.
As with PayPal, for instance, when we looked at markets that have a recognized problem with normal banking and financing, right? We did a market segmentation, we did some research, and there's about 7 industries that have a problem that's recognized right now, and they're all distasteful to somebody. So
Right.
that could be things like cannabis, that could be things like pornography, it could be things like prostitution and gambling, and refugees and immigrants remittances, payday lenders, things like that, though, and guns and things
Right.
like that. Now, it's funny because if you were conservative,
Yeah,
you probably don't like any of those things except for one of them, right?
I know. Well, that's the funny thing is they're all considered and termed high risk markets, except there's only one that's protected by the U.S. Constitution. There's one that's written into the senior laws of the land that all the states agreed to, and it wasn't weed.
Well,
I find that interesting. But yeah, totally. I know the conservative crowd is, I would say as a main, is not into those other high risk markets,
Not
so
publicly.
Yeah, it's not publicly. Right. Yeah. I mean, so it's too bad that it gets grouped in with those when it's, if you know the industry like you or I do, like it's a very friendly, close-knit, family-oriented sporting industry. So it's really too bad that it gets grouped in with other things that it doesn't need to be.
Well, I think, when I come to Nashville, we should have a long conversation about freedom and what that looks like. And this is where social conservatives, and it's hard to talk about guns without getting into politics, but this is where
Totally.
social conservatives in a lot of ways kind of miss the boat, right?
Right.
Is I say I live a very, personally, I live a very social conservative life personally,
Right.
but I also realize that if we want a free society, that what that requires of me as an individual is that to realize and understand and be okay with other people will make decisions and choices about their lives that I wouldn't like or agree with. And I need to be okay with that, because the alternative is a big government that then has the power to do whatever it wants.
Right.
So on one hand, a lot of people hate the fact that people use the courts to sue everybody out of oblivion, and then until it affects them, right? And then they say,
Right.
well, this private company doesn't want to deal business with us, so we need to sue them. Well,
Right.
it's a private company, right? And, on one hand, and I'm just poking fun here, and I'm not anti-conservative or anything, but you'll see, people, conservatives that want to be able to deny service based on, they don't want to bake the cake, right?
Right.
But on the same token, if someone wants to reverse that, and now they do want to force somebody to bake the payment processing, right?
Right.
So this is where it gets, we got to be consistent. And again, people are very libertarian when it comes to themselves,
Right.
but not necessarily other people. And to me, I'm okay with PayPal denying anybody they want, because I believe it's freedom of association. A private company should be able to deny.
That's why I have mixed opinions myself, where on one hand, I don't like it, but
Right.
it's that company. I don't want anyone telling me what to do with my business. I'll tell you that. you
Me
know,
neither.
and I feel like I can respect the right of somebody else, but, you know, like I love using Dick's Sporting Goods as an example, but you know, like, or Walmart or any of these other ones who've kind of hopped on board in the, you know, sort of withdrawing from the firearms industry, even if it's just if they don't want to get sued, whatever it is, you know, let the free market work on them. That's what I believe. Like, I don't want anyone telling me what to do with my business. So if I make a really bad decision and decide to alienate, you know, a quarter of my customers or clients, well, hey, it's going to hurt my pocketbook. You know, it's going to hurt our bank account. So I go, you know, that's a very powerful message to send to any corporation. Like, I'll never shop at a Dick's Sporting Goods again. You know, have fun. And I'm just one guy, and I know there's a ton out there, and that's a ton of money, and that's going to be the biggest point. So that's why I believe in letting, you know, hey, you want to run your business that way, it's your business. Or, you know, the shareholders, they want to go into agreement on something, fine. The free market's going to do its job.
I agree. And I think part of it is that you should vote with your dollars. And for instance, not only do I not shop at Dick's Sporting Goods anymore because they are anti-gun, but I won't use Uber or Lyft anymore because they also recently signed on to a letter that, you know, was very anti-gun a couple months ago when those 100+ CEOs of major companies wanted more gun control. Uber and Lyft were both signatories to that, and I won't use those services again. And you know, that's a big inconvenience for me for traveling to, say, other cities. And in fact, recently I was traveling to Las Vegas, and I had to figure out a ride to get somewhere because I won't download those apps. They were removed from I canceled my accounts and removed those apps. And so now it makes it a little harder for me, but I do vote my principles. But I also think when you have private companies making these political decisions, that also opens the door for innovation. And I believe this is one of those things that can drive what we're doing. So I believe if you close the door in one place in the market, another opportunity opens. And I think this is what's going to drive the adoption of decentralized projects where we get trusted banks, quote unquote, out of the loop. Now, wouldn't it be nice that you don't have to go through Visa and MasterCard to do business, or you don't have to go through a PayPal to do business, because there's other systems that are decentralized and don't have a central control that's in the middle making those political decisions.
And I'm 100% behind that. The less, what can I say? Less regulations, decentralization. I mean, you know, I even this morning was paying a fee for my company, and I'm kind of like, why am I paying a fee for this? I feel like, you know, the founding fathers would roll over in their graves if they saw some of the taxes and regulation. Like, it is completely not what this place was intended to be. And I, you know, it wasn't even a lot of money, but the fact that I even had to do it, like I have to check for this one stupid little thing that has nothing to do with the government. And I was like, so I, you know, I mean, the push definitely needs to go in that direction, and it's in being hugely demanded right now.
Yeah, I think ultimately market decisions will drive innovation. And so if people want to be political, that's their choice. Now, I'm old enough to remember when I didn't know the political affiliations of the companies I did business with. When I was growing up, and even when I was in business school, they said, don't be political. You know, you're going to alienate your customers, and customers are, you know, a good thing. And I get, you know, with the gun space, it's political. So I understand that trade-off that I'm dealing with in this space. And so I know that I have to basically, there's a line in the sand when you're willing to be gun friendly or be focused on supporting an industry that has a problem in this space, because it is distasteful to some people. But I also think now that is what we're dealing with in the United States, where companies are drawing lines in the sand, that this will drive innovation. And I'm excited.
It's funny. I had I had the viewpoint once. You know, when I was younger, I didn't know all the politics. I hadn't even read my Constitution. You know, other people paid attention in their high school government classes or even understood what the hell they were hearing. No, they didn't, you know? You know, so it is interesting. Like, I used to have that opinion. I used to just, politics were my politics. I used to keep it out of business. And then people weren't so touchy about it. It wasn't so vicious, you know? Now, you know, I mean, yeah, for one, being in the firearm space, you've chosen one side. You know, I mean, it's sort of hard to stay like apolitical there, with the exception that, like I said earlier, like the two-party system, I don't prescribe to or subscribe to any of that stuff. I don't affiliate myself with any party. I don't feel like I don't know anywhere in the Constitution it talks about parties. I don't like that stuff at all. I think we need to make that go the way of the dinosaur. But, so I can kind of say that stuff. And then in terms of, I don't know, I sort of consider firearms, it's too bad that it's getting the press that it's getting and how touchy it is. But it's a niche market, just like any other sport. You're a basketball fan, you're a hockey fan, or you're into archery. I mean, these are niche markets. So I mean, it's I don't know, it's not political, and it's just being made political, in terms of the industry, I should say. Other than the Second Amendment, it's written in there, and it's in there for a reason. And it's not so, I mean, yeah, of course it's so you can protect your family, but that's not the real reason that these guys wrote it into the Constitution. Like, that's what I think some people who haven't read their history or don't know their history. If you go back and look, like, well, okay, well, why are firearms in the senior law of the land? Why did they do that? And you only need to look back from where they came from and what they were handling and realize, had to do with oppressive government, but unless you read your history, you're like, oh, cool, I can have a gun and protect my family, and that's what it's all about. And you're like, no, that's not what it's there for.
Well, I think if you want to look at a contemporary example, look at Hong Kong right now.
Fascinating, right?
And to me, if those people had firearms, they would not be getting beaten in the streets.
Dude, well, it blows me away, Rob. Like, I see in America protests waving this communist flag, with the sickle and the hammer, and that's in the States. And then you go over to China, well, Hong Kong, right? And they're waving the American flag. Isn't that amazing?
Well, it's ironic that this morning I actually had a conference call to the Ukraine with an exchange that we might be doing business with. And I find it's interesting talking to Eastern Europeans and Asians versus Americans and Western Europeans. Mm-hmm. And what I'm finding is that actually Asians are really pro-gun, like especially say in like Hong Kong and Japan, where they really can't even own guns. They're very pro-gun. And Eastern Europeans are very pro-gun. It's the Western Europeans and the Americans that now have this weird anti-gun thing happening. I don't know what happened to the West. I always tell people too, when we talk about banning, immigrants and things like that, but they always say, well, let the Europeans in. I'm like, you know what? The Europeans are the ones that invented socialism and invented communism. Okay. Right. So if you want to like ban a certain group of people from coming here, maybe it's the people that invented that garbage in the first place. Maybe start there. But,
well, and even then, like, I agree with immigration, in that it should be not stopped. I mean, people come to this country for a reason, but it should be monitored. There should be rules. I do agree with that. It can't just be a free for all, but
let's ban commies. I start there. Let's start banning commies.
I mean, but the interesting thing though is, like, there's people who come to this country who appreciate it more than the people who were born here, who maybe have gotten soft over the generations. Like, they know what this place is, and they compare it to their home. Like, an interesting factoid about Nashville that I didn't know is there was, until I moved here, is there's a large Kurdish population here. And they were refugees from whenever that was, I think it was the early 90s or something like that. And I've talked to some of these people, and one of them was a neighbor of mine, and they get it. And they really appreciate the freedoms that they have here that they didn't have, where they were straight up being, run out and murdered, And so I guarantee you commie flag waving Portlander that I saw and was watching, if their life was in danger from the government, that they, like if they were being run out of their homes and areas, it would be a very different story. They wouldn't be buying into the propaganda, which is what it is, and there's one thing you said that I like to make comment on too, oh, how anti-gun America is. That's not true. There's a percentage. There's definitely a group, but I would still be willing to defend that the large percentage of Americans are, pro firearms, pro Constitution. I don't buy the mainstream media's reports. Like every time there's a poll or anything like that, I go, who did you poll? I've never been polled in my 40 years of existence. I've never received one survey or one poll from any of you guys. Like, who are you asking? I could go poll right now. Like, I could go call 50 people who I know who are all firearms friendly and have one set of answers. Or I could go, into, a major city and walk around where it's a little more liberal and get 50 sets of other answers. Doesn't make it a correct survey,
True. And I agree with that. I mean, it's poll taking is very partisan regardless and inexact science. But I can tell you through what I'm doing with crypto, I'm traveling a lot. And I go to California, I go to New York, I go, all over the country. And I definitely see a big difference from people that grew up and, in, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, and, California. The people in those places now never were exposed to guns growing up, largely. And I think that's a big deal. And I just saw an article this morning about people, surprisingly, that people that are exposed to guns don't fear them as much. But I think the problem is a lot of the people like in New York City or some of these places where basically guns are essentially outlawed. They're not growing up around them, so they don't even understand the culture. And everything they know about guns is either from the media, it's either from the movies or it's from the news. And that's both usually propaganda on both sides too.
Right.
And I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you, but I grew up I was a Boy Scout. We shot little 22 rifles.
Absolutely.
It was no big deal. Nobody cared.
Nobody cared. But, I'm also a Gen Xer. So, I think it's different now. And look at the Boy Scouts are dying as an organization too. So you got to take that because, there's fewer Boy Scouts now.
Right.
So
I was just reading there's a set of girls, I think it was in Indiana, who opened their own Boy Scout troop, but it's all girls. I'm like, isn't that just the Girl Scouts?
No, it's not. Actually, I'm going to say an unpopular opinion. I actually support that.
Yeah.
And you know why?
No.
Is because think about this. And I was a Boy Scout too. I didn't get my Eagle, but I got close. I was a Life Scout. But here's the thing. There's no equivalent in the Girl Scouts to becoming an Eagle Scout. And there are societal benefits to being an Eagle Scout. Like, for instance, if you're an Eagle Scout, you go to basic training in the Army, you're an E3 from day one. For instance, you can get scholarships for college. It's considered something you would hire on. It's a hiring bullet point. So, and the Girl Scouts don't have an equivalent. And on top of that, the Girl Scouts don't really focus on the outdoor activity part of scouting like the Boy Scouts do.
Right,
and in fact, it's interesting. I live in Utah, and the churches basically was at one point, the LDS church was like the biggest, like every church had its own troop. That was kind of the church, and the church has ended that relationship, and they're weaning themselves off that relationship right now. But I would love for my one daughter who's of age to be a Boy Scout, because I think they learn good things.
It's interesting. I didn't know those details, because like in terms of this whole gender garbage, that I disagree with fully. I think that's crap. Sure. But that actually makes sense in terms of, I guess you would just eliminate it and just call it Scouts.
Right.
And that would make sense.
And that is how it is in other countries too, by the way. They've actually had the thing. The Girl Scouts, though, and again getting political, is that the Girl Scouts are very political too, very left wing. And so, I want my kids to be very I have 4 kids, 2 girls, 2 boys, and I want them all to have both vocational skills, survival skills, shooting skills, and STEM-based academic skills. And so to me, that's important. And I would love there to be, a good scouting program that my girls and my boys could all learn the same skills. And we're gonna look at that, but it's
Yeah.
just one of those things that lots of people don't look at it like that, because if you're an Eagle Scout, though, there are societal benefits, and
Well, you
girls
don't.
are
What if they
locked out of
reported
that.
that in the media? What you just said, that whole point. It's a very good point. What if they reported that in the media? People would be like, "Hey, I could see that," because you're telling me, and I go, "Yeah, I could see that. I can't. I think that's actually great. If there was just a scouting program for kids, period, that's great. Because you're right. If the programs aren't comparable, but just pushing it for the sake of this
Right.
whole
Gender stuff.
lame. Yeah, I'm like, okay, guys, like enough.
And,
Like,
and and I think part of the Boy Scout problem, I know a lot of Scout leaders, and I think part of the problem is, as well, is that the Boy Scouts are losing membership radically, and I think that's part of the problem too. Now, don't get me wrong, I do believe there's a lot of crazy people that just want to file lawsuits to be jerks, right? They're
right.
just trying to push a point, and that drives some of this too. So, the world is not a black and white place as much as I want it to be.
Right.
Life would be so much simpler if it wasn't for people.
Right.
So what else are you seeing in your numbers in your survey so far?
It's really, yeah. I got a few more points that are kind of interesting. There was quite a bit of bad. Like, there's more closures coming. Um, that's coming. We're gonna see more big, small ones. It's not done yet, and there's been a lot the last couple of years. There's similar things that I see every year that are still occurring that will probably always occur, like the brick and mortars versus the buying power of the big box retailers or the internet giants. That's occurring. Hey, the manufacturers, can you guys enforce your map pricing? That's always a big one that I hear every year. The shrinking margins I hear every year. So that hasn't changed. That's continued. A positive note was, Black Friday. I think the whole Black Friday weekend was good this year. In fact, I think it was number 2 in terms of records.
Nice.
There was over like
Nice.
200,000 federal background checks. So we know at least 200,000 firearms sold. So that was kind of cool. So there's an uptick there. That was positive. And I think another interesting thing I did see, which I wasn't totally sure of, because I get mixed reports on this, but I had people throwing in, go Trump 2020. There was kind of a lot. So there's still, I think, as a whole, and again, these are sort of general. It's not every single person. These are just kind of highlights that I took note of. But it still appears that Trump is very much supported by the industry, at least for the most part, from what we could see. But in summary, I'd say the senior things that I could really tell you are the discrimination, and all what I said, the media, the government, the regulations, all that stuff. So that's still huge in the tech companies. The strangulation of the market is still occurring. And I want to give one shout out. Again, I don't know who said this, but just somebody did say the best part of their 2019 was the gun industry marketplace, and they said keep it up. So whoever you are, thanks for that.
So, a question, strangulation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we do have merchant processing that's still out there.
Mm-hmm.
So is the current merchant processing, what would be the strangulation part of that? I do know that there are gun-friendly, merchant processing services out there. Is it just are they not adequate to meet the demand right now?
Some are, but like, for example, I was talking to a dealer yesterday, and he was making a switch from one who is a firearms friendly payment processor, but the rates were just, this is a local dealer, nice company, but small, so it's just not affordable. He wasn't getting the benefits of maybe a larger supported payment processing company that, I don't know. So it's just pricing him out a little bit.
What kind of rates were they getting?
I don't know the specifics of the rates. I just know he was leaving one, who I'm not going to say who it is, but I know who it is, and he's making a move to another one, which was a new name for me, which I think was a local or regional company. So
Sure.
New to my radar anyway.
Well, it's good to hear what's going on in the industry, and that's what I really like you as a respected source, because you're got your ear to the street out there. So where can people find out more?
Well, let's see, we don't really publish this, I usually,
Okay.
so, but, if they want to find us, we're just gunindustrymarketplace.com. And the one final point that I'd like to just kind of get out there for anyone listening here is, if you really want to help the firearms industry right now, like the thing that I would probably tell you to do as of December 2019, just go buy a gun, go buy another one. If a lot of people did that right now, it would just like help move things a little bit more. So go buy guns, man. Exercise your right. That's what I would tell people to do to help right now.
I can't think of better advice. Owen York, thank you so much for coming on today.
Hey, thanks for having me again, Rob.
Thank you for listening to the Rob McNeely program. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcneely.com and subscribe to our podcast at YouTube, iTunes, and on the Google Play Store.